Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Wednesday, the 23rd of October, 2019. And tonight's topic, U.S. risks financial Armageddon, warns former Bank of England chief. We're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about, get a little update on cryptocurrency, specifically the big drop today in most cryptocurrencies across the board. We're going to get an update on the backed trading, what's been going on there, and also what's going on with Litecoin, with the Litecoin Summit coming up, and their announcement that they'll be adding a privacy feature into Litecoin. So let's get into this financial Armageddon. Now, I'm going to preface my statements with saying this is not supposed to be link spam and getting people all excited because people flock to this type of news, but this is indeed a statement by the former Bank of England. Now, the former Bank of England, his name was Mervyn King, and he issued this warning in this statement at the IMF just a couple of days ago. I was going to go into what he said, but keep in mind that the Bank of England is also home of a one Mark Carney. Now, if you recall, we covered when Mark Carney spoke at the I can't think of the name of that conference anymore. It's out there in the woods. It's not Bretton Woods. It is the Jackson Hole. That's the one. Well, he spoke there the same day that Jerome Powell spoke, but he gave this long-winded speech about end of dollar hegemony and China can be the new hegemon. Sounded like a gold pumper, warning that the dollar's days are numbered, and that was his speech. Now, Mervyn King, who had his job before Carney did over at the Bank of England, leading that particular bank, he also, I do think, now, again, take my comments with a grain of salt, but I took Carney's comments with a grain of salt because we've been hearing about end of dollar hegemony in China and so on. And actually, he doesn't seem to have updated his speech. I think China's in a worse condition today, given their capital controls, the rejection the yuan as an international reserve currency by central banks, the problems that they're having. I'm not quite sure that the world is ready to just swap out the yuan for dollar, especially since China's economy runs on borrowed dollars. But put that aside, just putting into context that we did hear Mark Carney going on and on with the typical gold pumper end of dollar hegemony, China to crush the dollar narrative. Literally, that's the speech. We've covered this already. But now, let's talk about the more recent comments by our friend here, Mervyn King. Now, some of this, I believe, is just a way of gaining attention to keep themselves relevant. Because nothing he said is not, it's not that it's not correct. But if you recall our discussions on the financial system has become more and more controlled by and under the thumb of the central banks, including, the Bank of England is not a major player in all this. The big players are going to be the ECB, the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Japan, and of course the People's Bank of China. So I think that these Bank of England central bankers like to keep their names in the paper, but it is worth going through what he did have to say, and we'll cover what he said. He said that another economic and financial crisis would be devastating to the legitimacy of a democratic market system. Well, I'm not sure that's true, but I'm not sure that what the central banks do are functions of a democratic system. I don't think that the central banks of China work any differently than the central banks of the ECB and the other nations, other than perhaps the difference between the Fed and the People's Bank of China is the Fed pretends to be independent and not subject to political pressures, whereas other central banks are basically arms of the political government that's in charge at the time. Then he said, by sticking to the new orthodoxy of monetary policy and pretending that we have made banking systems safe, we are sleepwalking towards a crisis. What he's getting at there is that what we call now modern monetary orthodoxy is just printing up money and lowering interest rates. He's absolutely right. But if you recall when we talked about the damn Fed analogy, this is the system they have created. It's what Japan did and averted a crisis, but slowed down growth. And they knew when they used these tools, so to speak, in handling the 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011 financial crisis, they essentially were repeating the mistakes of Japan. However, one may recall Ben Bernanke has said, and Milton Friedman and others, that one of the problems of the Great Depression was that the central bank at the time, the Federal Reserve, did not act aggressively in light of slowing economic activity. My view is, and we'll get your views at the end of the presentation, is that once you have created this system, it's all based on fractional reserve banking. It's all based on central banks calling the shots. Well, then they have to step up. They can't just create the dam and walk away. They have to patch it up. They have to make sure it doesn't overflow. They have to make sure it doesn't burst. And if it does burst, they have to be ready to fix it. Now, you could say, well, they can just abandon it. That's a different story. That's a different debate. But when central bankers like this guy, Marvin King, starts talking about what I think is the obviously, that we haven't made the banking system safer, but the nature of the whole system is not safe. A dam is not safe in general. There's no such thing as a safe banking system if it's based on that the central bank is somehow in charge of the economy. That is what the Federal Reserve has been given the task of, not just stable prices, but full employment. Central banks have other goals in other areas of the world as well. So once you have that, they're not really in a position to act as free market stewards. They're really there to intervene. And because they intervene, they're constantly going to have to intervene. So I don't understand. This is nothing new to say that the financial system is always on pins and needles. Of course it is. It's on no more pins. It's always, I think, like a dam. It's ready to burst, and it has to be taken care of. And again, we can discuss whether we should have the dam or not, but we have the dam. We have the Federal Reserve. We have central banking. We have them in charge of the financial system. So, with Mark Carney going on and saying that, well, he says, oh, no one can doubt that we are once more living through a period of political turmoil. But there has been no comparable questioning of the basic ideas of underpinning economic policy. That needs to change. Yeah, change to what? Again, once you have this dam set up, they have no other choice than to support the system. And the way they support the system is printing the money, printing the money, printing the money, as Mario Draghi might say. I don't think he ever said printed the money. He did say we need to worry about the helicopter, because that's not something, the helicopter money can be dropped by the ECB. That's something that's a fiscal policy issue in the European Union. All right. But then I think he's just trying to keep himself relevant. But he did say that the U.S., and this is, again, tell us something we don't know. The U.S. would suffer financial Armageddon if its central bank, the Federal Reserve, lacked the necessary firepower to combat another episode similar to the subprime mortgage sell-off. Stop. You will recall, the Fed in 2008 and 2009 wasn't really ready to handle this. They weren't. If you listen to Bernanke and other Fed heads at the time, they thought that lower real estate price is something we haven't seen. I don't accept the premise of your question. I think when Maria Bartiromo asked Ben Bernanke about what happens if real estate prices fall, won't we have a problem? He said, no, I don't think so. We never had that issue. But what we did see was the Fed move into action, and we also saw the Congress move into action with bailouts. Now, technically now, what the Fed is saying, and they have been saying for a year or so now, is in the next crisis, because there always will be a crisis. They've set this thing up for crisis. I mean, there's too much debt in the system. And the only way they can fix it, there's the old free market way is, got to liquidate the debt, as Ron Paul would say, and in the Fed. That would create such economic displacement that no central bank and no politician will ever go for. So we put that aside. So they're back to, what are we going to do? Print the money, print the money, print the money, lower the rate of interest. That's what they're going to do. So for this guy, Marvin King, who's no longer a policymaker, to say we got to think, we can't just do what we used to do, well, you tell me, and he doesn't. He doesn't tell us what else we should do. He basically says that if the Fed lacked the necessary firepower to combat another episode similar to the subprime sell-off, there'd be financial Armageddon. Well, he's actually arguing for the Fed being ready to intervene in a massive way. And one could argue, if you're taking the view that this is what the Fed needs to do if they're going to preserve the system, they've even admitted they didn't buy enough assets during the financial crisis. They're saying they could have bought more. Not only could they have bought more, they could have bought a different style or different tenor of assets, except they weren't allowed to. And they're going to present a paper in early next year on what type of assets they may be wishing to buy if there's another financial crisis. So yes, indeed, I think, and we'll see what you think at the end after we talk about the cryptocurrencies, that the financial system is based, well, it's not based on crisis, but it's set up by its very way it's set up. It's prone to crisis. And because of that, the central bank has to come running in. Now, let's take a look quickly. What a lot of people are getting on the repo madness. And again, this is just dam patching. Let's look at what's happened with yesterday's repo. You don't get all these hysterical repo madness YouTubes. People love that kind of stuff. No, the Fed's balance sheet. Well, it's gone down. You know, on a day that it goes down, you don't have all the breathless commentary on how the Fed's pawn shop is just printing. See, people actually believe, I answer questions on this all the time, that the Fed is giving out money and or just taking bad collateral. It's not. What they're doing is they're making an overnight facility available and a 14-day term loan available upon the presentation of U.S. Treasuries, agency debt, and agency mortgage-backed securities. Not just any old mortgage-backed securities. These are federally guaranteed agency mortgage-backed securities. You can see there 48 billion, but you see they've also done a repurchase of 18 billion in treasuries. This is just the way they have to play the game, and I think they're playing it. I'm not in favor of this, but there really is, as Peter Schiff says, no exit. Once you go down this road, I mean, he would argue that just have the hell with it. Let the whole thing collapse. Ron Paul would say, liquidate the debt. Well, okay, that's probably not going to happen. There's no policymaker around today that would allow that to happen, and there's obviously no politician that would want that to happen on their watch. All right, let's move on now to got him, not there. Okay, let's move on now to some updates on cryptocurrencies. Here's an interesting one. John McAfee is famous for insisting the price of Bitcoin will be $1 million by the end of 2020. That's not very far away. That is just 14 months away and change. He recently upped his prediction to $2 million based on what he called math, the primacy of math. I put out a poll, 150 respondents, not a bad sampling, on Twitter. I would say my Twitter following are mostly gold and silver people. I've been there the longest. The same with this channel. This channel is not a crypto channel. It is, but I mean, the followers are primarily not crypto. They like to follow other crypto pumper channels, just like many gold and silver people here like to follow other gold and silver pumper channels. But for the most part, I would say I'm 75-80% of my audience, Smaulgld audience, is interested in gold, silver, and economics. And a good portion of them are totally against cryptocurrencies. Think that even if you're discussing them, you're pumping them, they want nothing to do with it. Many of them have unsubscribed in haste or in anger, or just to teach me a lesson. But in any event, I asked the question, okay, Bitcoin, $1 million by the end of 2020. What are the chances? Now, 63% I think are rational. They said 0. Now, actually, 0 is not really a good, I mean, anything is possible. But I would say statistically it's less than 1%. But 1 to 10%, there's actually 27% of people out there that think there's a 1% chance that it could happen. That's pretty high. And some of those people think 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. More surprising, about 1 in 10 people thought that there's a 10 to a 90 or 10 to 100% chance of Bitcoin going to $1 million. Now, I suppose it's a better shot than a lottery ticket. Only because, I mean, they do the math. There's 17 million, 18 million that have been mined. There's 3 million left to mine. Very few will be mined over the next 100 years. Of those 3 million, they say 3 to 5 million are lost. If there's any interest in these things, then yeah, on the scarcity basis, it could go. I just would think as it's rising, if it's rising that fast, people are going to be dumping. Well, it'd have to be one hell of a rally. I don't see it. I put it at a, I'm going to put it at 0% chance, but we'll get your views on that. Now, let's see what else is going on. That doesn't mean it won't go up. Doesn't mean it won't go down, but I think that is quite a stretch to go to $1 million, especially as we only have 14 months left. Okay. I'll eat my words if it doesn't, but I think John McAfee will eat something else if it doesn't. Okay. If it does, I will eat my words. If it doesn't, John McAfee will have something else on the menu. Now, I did notice today, and BACT has been bad news. I don't have charts for you tonight, but BACT has been bad news ever since it came out. For those of you who don't know what BACT is, it is a consortium of the New York Stock Exchange, Boston Consulting Group, Microsoft, and they are promoting a Bitcoin futures exchange platform which delivers physical Bitcoin. And ever since they launched, the price of Bitcoin has fallen from about 12,000 down to the current price in around, I don't know what it is right now, 7,400. And they opened up just a month or so ago to very low volume, and they've had very low volume ever since they've opened up. But the price has gone down. The question is whether institutions are interested in cryptocurrencies, or maybe they just prefer to trade on the CME Group futures, which has been around since in December 2017. They have record volume. BACT doesn't seem to be gaining traction, except today. They did do almost 600 contracts. Now, 600 contracts sounds like a lot. It's more than the 229, I think, was their prior record a week or so ago. But that's less than $5 million. So it's really a pittance. It's really nothing at all. It's still more than what they had been doing. But that's what's happening with Bitcoin. Fidelity announced their platform is now live for institutions. And I think qualified institutional investors can now store and trade with Fidelity. We'll see how it goes if they launch that for, I guess, regular investors. Now, the Litecoin. Litecoin has a big announcement now. One of the problems or issues with Bitcoin and Litecoin, some might argue, is it's not really private. I mean, they used to say everything was anonymous until they've realized that once you get an address and you send money to it, you can then track everything that's in that wallet. It takes a lot of forensics, but you can, depending on the type of transaction, you can track the transaction. Because remember, the blockchain is a permanent ledger and everyone can see it. So there are people, and there are actually companies that are working on how to track transactions. You know, you can triangulate. You buy something online, it comes from a particular wallet. It's not 100% anonymous. Anyway, Litecoin has been working on a thing called Wimble. I'm not going to go into the details, but they'll use larger blocks, and then there'll be a soft fork, and you can opt into it, and you can scramble your Litecoin transaction, and it'll be fungible, and they won't know where it came from. The other reason they want to do this isn't just for privacy for the user, but it could get to the point where, as I mentioned, companies working on this, they can find what you would call dirty Bitcoin or dirty Litecoin and not accept that Bitcoin in a transaction because it wouldn't be fungible. So let's say someone's involved in criminal activity and then they wanted to use that Bitcoin to buy legitimate goods and services. The company can say, I'm not taking that Bitcoin. And this would eliminate that issue because it's the same issue with, I'm not going to take those dollars. Well, yeah, you are, because they're as good as any other dollars. You really can't have bad money, unless bad cash, unless it's marked bills. But that wouldn't mean that the merchant wouldn't accept them. It would just mean that law enforcement can track and trace them. This is the reverse situation, where a merchant may not want to accept bad Bitcoin, but they would accept good cash, and this would effectively make the Litecoin fungible Litecoin. You wouldn't know where it's been. You wouldn't know if it's dirty or not. Now, the issue with all this is, and I think they've thought this through fairly well, it's privacy coins like Monero and I think Zcash they have a problem with getting, well, for example, in Japan cryptocurrencies are perfectly acceptable, perfectly legal, but they don't allow on the exchanges the privacy coins. So they figure it's like a stock. If you can buy stocks and everything is reported, they don't care if they're cryptocurrencies. There's a lot of people who think that the cryptocurrency, and it's because there's a lot of Bitcoin fanatics who keep talking about, it's the same as end the dollar hegemony. They say Bitcoin's going to end central banking, end the dollar, and not quite sure that that's really on the cards, in the cards. I think more likely, if backed as any example, that this stuff will be tracked and traced to a certain extent. And if you have a gain in your Apple stock, it gets reported. If you have a gain on your backed Bitcoin futures contract and you accept delivery of those Bitcoin, I wouldn't expect that the institution is going to say, I'm hiding this, and not they even could. So I think that's what's happening there. But Litecoin looks like it's making a play to differentiate itself from Bitcoin, because a lot of the criticism of Litecoin is it has no use case, which I disagree with, because it's nothing more than a cheap Bitcoin. I think actually a cheap Bitcoin does go back to the idea of silver to Bitcoin's gold, because gold is not spent. Gold is hoarded, and it's a store of value. Now, if you believe that Bitcoin is digital gold, why would you want to create Lightning Network? That's no different than gold money. No one wants to spend the Bitcoin if they think it's digital gold, but they may want to spend Litecoin. There's a fine line you draw. I think Litecoin can be similar to the dollar. It has to be somewhat of a store of value, not something everyone. For example, the Venezuelan Bolivar is neither a store of value or good currency. No one will acquire it for that reason. No one will hold on to it. They'll get rid of it. People will save in dollars, and people do. It's not the smartest thing to do, because the dollar will depreciate. But the dollar is excellent for liquidity. You can spend it. And that may end up being what happens with Litecoin. It's a good coin. Probably have better retention and value if the crypto space develops, so it's a store of value. But people will be more likely probably to send and use and trade Litecoin in normal, smaller transactions. And they probably don't want to spend their Bitcoin. And I see that on the Smaulgld side. I get donations, a few a month in Litecoin. I've gotten one Bitcoin in like a year. People are not spending their Bitcoin. So again, the Litecoin Foundation, they've released the whole paper. It's out there. It's on GitHub. Charlie Lee Satoshi Light has proposed a draft of 2 Litecoin improvement proposals to implement Mimblewimble through extension blocks. The other thing they've done is they've come up with some type of, and I haven't read through it, if there's quantum computing that can get it, there's all types of ways now to protect against quantum computing. They think quantum keys. We're not going to get into that tonight, but as that develops, we will follow that. I think quantum computing is probably a bigger risk just to general banks than it is to cryptocurrencies, because I think they can. First of all, we don't even really know how the quantum computing will work. We're not even there yet, but it is definitely something that people need to be paying attention to. But the idea that it's just going to wipe out all cryptocurrencies, I don't think that's the case. Based on, I've read a few hours worth on quantum computing and cryptocurrencies and ways to change that. All right, let's see. There's one other thing. Pay your employees with Bitcoin, Litecoin. It's quite an interesting concept. This is a company, Cornerstone Global Management. I don't know if anyone would want this, but it allows you to, and they've teamed up the Litecoin Foundation to create a system where you can pay part of your employees in cryptocurrencies. So you do have an ecosystem building where you have payment processors that are willing to accept cryptocurrencies on behalf of merchants and convert them into fiat. And here, I guess you're doing something the other way. You're allowing the employer to pay their employees in cryptocurrencies. All right, that's what I got for you tonight. I got a lot of gold stories. We're going to cover those as part and parcel of the Solid Gold Sunday with Smaulgld. And if you enjoyed this, please consider supporting Smaulgld. I just found out the Subscribestar fees are 5%. I finally got paid my $150 for my 5 Subscribestars have been with me for 6-7 months. Thank you very much for the Subscribestar members. Patron I get every month, and that's going well. But again, they take a few percent, and then when it gets sent out, PayPal takes a cut. But I do appreciate that. If you want Smaulgld to receive 100% of the proceeds of your donation, you can do that by sending checks, cash, items of value to Smaulgld LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire 03820. Or you can support Smaulgld by sending Bitcoin or Litecoin to the QR codes on your screen there, or the links. All the information is below this BitChute and this YouTube video. Or you can shop at the Smaulgld store and get yourself one of those game-changing Smaulgld mugs. They do get a small commission on those. And one other thing, you can also buy precious metals through the Smaulgld site, the affiliate links. I get a commission on that. Full disclosure. SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, and Golden Eagle Coins. But we do have news, and please, if you're going to buy precious metals, it's not investment advice to do so. Please consider using those links because you don't pay any more, any less. If you're going to shop at those 3 sites, please click on the links and do so. But I did, and I want to thank people who have been doing that, not so much lately. And I don't think it's because the lack of interest in Smaulgld. There have been very low sales in precious metals. But I do want to let you know, if you didn't hear this already, but Provident Metals, who I thought was a pretty good bullion dealer, they had some interesting coins on their own that they had custom made. They have merged with JM Bullion. I think JM Bullion has purchased Provident Metals, so I don't know if anyone's ordered. I used to have JM Bullion as a Smaulgld affiliate, and I did very well with them. They canceled that affiliate program a few years back, so they're no longer on that. I don't think that Provident Metals is on it either. So I don't think we'll see an affiliate agreement there. But we still have it with SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, and Golden Eagle Coin. All right, let's see what we got in the comments. Who do we got here? We got 22 watching. And we've got Eli is here. Good to see. Fiona Whalen. Hello, Fiona. Rob B. All the mainstream financial products have had a negative effect. Yep, that is definitely true. BitPay card, you can now use Ethereum. Interesting. Sounds like some Harry Potter garbage. I don't know what that relates to, but all right. We don't have many comments. We had a lot of people watching, but it looks like that's going to be about it then for tonight. I do want to thank you all for joining me tonight. I look forward to speaking to you again. Have a good night.